Why did you and your first significant other break up? Around 14, me and a few of the guys I went to school with started hanging around with these girls from another school on the other side of the city. We hung out a lot, all friends, then the other guys started dating some of the girls, and in an effort to not make me feel left out, I wasn't interested in dating at the time. I was quite happy playing football and chilling out, so they brought their other friend. We'll call her Maria. Anyway, Maria and I are talking. We have very little in common. I like sports and music. She likes to do very little and read. I should point out here, Maria was absolutely stunning. At the time a solid 10, whereas I sat somewhere around a 5 pushing a 6. All good. This goes on for a few weeks. I like her. She's funny, gorgeous, and I was quite happy, basically sitting looking at her. This all takes place during summer holidays. Anyway, school comes around. Me, one of my best friends are sat in our electronics class. We picked it for our GCSEs and we were starting our projects that week, and he says, I bet you 20 pounds and a packet of whatever it is you're smoking that you can't make you and Maria official. I took it as a joke and said, yeah, whatever man, you're on. So for the next few weeks we were getting on well. We started meeting up earlier than the others and hanging out on our own. By this point she'd found out that I liked her. But guys being guys, my friends never mentioned if it was mutual. We had each other's phone numbers as well and would text all the time. This was back in 2004. We didn't have WhatsApp or iMessage, etc. We had 10p texts and a pay-as-you-go phone. Anyway, fast forward about 3 more weeks. We've sort of fallen into being a couple. We've not told anyone as we're kinda just confused about it as well. She asks if I think we're a couple. I said it's up to you. I'm happy either way. She says, yeah, let's make it official. So back in those days, you had MSN Messenger and MySpace. So to make it official, it was a top friend on MySpace and a name drop in your MSN name. That happened. The friend that made the bet with me instantly messages me saying, bullcrap. You've told her and she's going along with it. I asked what he was about. He says the bet we made. I said I thought that crap was a joke and men were just gonna see what happened. Anyway, the next time I see him he pays up, even though I said I thought he was joking. A year or so later, me and my mates are stressed as all hell. GCSEs are getting us down. We're starting to worry about college, etc. So electronics class happens again. I'm nearly done with my project, a laser-tripped home security system made for under 20 pounds. He's finishing up his road safety thing, and knocked my project off the table while I was picking some more parts out of my tray of components I'd ordered. I get back to the desk and my crap's in pieces on the floor. I go mental. It took Kyle about 6 months to design, sim, order parts and build to a point where it would work. I punched him for it. He knew how hard I'd worked on it. At the time I thought this, well-deserved beating. He says he's going to tell Maria about the bet. He proceeds to do so. The next time I saw her, she gave me a slap, says, so this year was nothing but a bet between you and your mates. You're a jerk. His girlfriend splits up with him because he split me and Maria up and she thought I was a nice guy and he'd messed my electronics course up entirely. Few months later me and Maria bump into each other out and about. I'm off to band practice. She's going to the library next to the practice rooms. After we'd done our respective activities for the day, we met for a milkshake, had a chat and tried again. 5 months later we split again. For unrelated reasons, I just wasn't into it anymore. Fun times. What was the worst reason someone gave for breaking up with you? About 6 years ago, I lived in an extremely tiny town. Nobody locked their doors or cars, or anything of that sort. Everyone knew each other and it was a very tight-knit community. For reference, I am 25 years old, 6 feet 4 inches, 260 pounds, around 10% body fat. I have an IFBB Pro card in bodybuilding. This will come into play later in the story. So my wife and my dog are sleeping in our bedroom, which is on the opposite side of our apartment, with the door closed, so the dog doesn't rumble through the garbage at night while we sleep. It's raining outside and usually the apartment creaks and makes noises because it's very old, but I ignore it and go back to sleep as it happens every night. Now this night in particular I was hearing some extra noises. My dog, who usually ignores the sounds as well, was going absolutely bonkers in the room. He's not a barker, but he lets me know when he hears something by jumping on the bed and licking my face, also when he's scared. So to get back to the story, my dog is going nuts, my wife is sound asleep, and I am up watching Netflix at around 3 a.m. when I have work at 8 a.m. I keep hearing these faint noises, like a cabinet opening and closing, but like I said before, we are in a very small community and I think nothing of it. No way someone is actually in my apartment. So all of a sudden I take one earphone out, and I hear at the flicker of a light switch. It's an old house, so it has those loud light switch flicker when you turn something on and off. I imminently knew something was wrong, as this is not a sound I normally hear, and I get up and creak my door open just a little and see a light on in the near kitchen room. I know I shut all the lights before showering before bed, so I leap into action, wake up my wife and tell her to stay here with the dog and lock the door and to not come out unless I say everything is safe. I walk into the kitchen and there is a guy, probably late 30s, going through every drawer and cabinet I had. I said hey in a loud voice and scared the absolute crap out of the guy. I guess he thought no one was home, and he charged at me. So for reference, remember I said 6'4", 260ths of a pounds, and the guy charging at me, around 5 feet 10 inches / 160? So he charges at me and I shove him against my wall with my forearm against his neck, make a huge hole in the wall, and begin to headbutt the guy until he's nearly unconscious. I turned him around and proceeded to hold him in a chokehold headlock, and out of nowhere his wife, I later found out it was his wife, was also in my apartment and came charging at me. I put up my foot, exactly how you would imagine it in the WWE, and I punted that goober right in her gut, and she fell to the floor. So now, the guy is unconscious, the girl is on the floor in massive amounts of pain, and I'm standing there covered in blood from this guy's face. I feel funny, not sure what this feeling is. I feel cold in a spot on my stomach, sort of like if you spit on your stomach and a strong gust of wind comes and it feels extra cold, you know what I mean? Well, I looked down and realized I got stabbed. I had a 4.5-inch knife in my clear abdomen muscle. While I was headbutting this guy, he was able to sneak a knife he had right into my gut, without me realizing it. I quickly start to panic and call 911. I sit there until they come, go to the hospital, nearly dying. I recovered well, missing all vital organs, and when I woke up in the hospital I had police there and was told that the guy robbing my apartment was dead. My headbutts broke his skull and he internally bled out in his brain. My heart sank. Yes, the guy stabbed me, yes, the guy threatened my wife and dog, who is like my son, and yes, he came onto my property, but I did not want to end anyone. Well anyway, to sum up the story, when I awoke in the hospital and they told me this, my wife divorced me on the spot saying she can't stay married to someone who ends someone else, regardless of the situation. What reason did you break up with your BF/GF for that they will never know about? I watched him cheat on me and he will never know. We lived in the same city and had been dating for about 10 months. The last couple of months his passive-aggressive manipulations had begun to come a bit more transparent, but I was young, and convinced I could fix everything. On a Friday when we had plans, he called to say a friend at work had been fired, and he was going to go out with him to help cheer him up. It was fine, I said, and he hung up before I could finish my sentence that I had left some work papers at his place the night before and needed to grab them. I had keys so I didn't think anything of swinging by after dinner and drinks with my brother to let myself in to grab them. As expected, he and his two best friends/roommates were out. What was not expected was when I was in a little office adjoining his bedroom gathering my papers, the apartment door opened and a lot of giggling ensued. I kept quiet as I assumed one of his friends was getting lucky and I didn't want to interrupt. Imagine my surprise when the giggling and intoxicated slurring approached the bedroom I usually occupied, followed by the squeaking bed springs and a symphony of noises usually associated with mating pigs. Any hope I might have had that it was one of his roommates too intoxicated to find his own room was dashed when she started yelling his name. As they were both clearly schnoozled, it didn't take long for them to pass out mid-thrust. I managed to unfreeze myself, and after spending several very sad moments looking at the irrefutable proof that this relationship was not worth saving, I slipped out the front door. I spent all night walking the city, at first feeling ashamed that he had cheated on me, then increasingly more angry that I felt ashamed, then finally angry at him. By the time morning arrived, I had decided how best to deal with the situation. I walked back to his building and called him when he picked up, clearly mostly asleep. I told him we needed to talk and I would be up in 5 minutes, and hung up, smiling for the first time as I imagined his panic. 5 minutes later, sitting in his living room, I simply said I felt we weren't working out, that I was not as happy as I suspected I could be, and that while our relationship used to be exciting, it was feeling more like a chore. I wished him the best and was walking out the door before he managed to pick his jaw off the floor. On a hunch, I went out the back door and was pleased, if not surprised, to find his half-dressed companion crouching out on the fire escape. What followed was weeks of pleading, denial and desperation on his part. When I was unyielding, he began to be suspicious. Did I know about his indiscretion? He, of course, couldn't ask me, in case I didn't know, so he started lashing out at all of his friends and coworkers who had been there that night, accusing them of telling me. And in this manner, they all learned of his infidelity. It caused, I later found, some major rifts between him and his friends, as they all liked me, and led to him being let go at work for increasingly erratic behavior and causing hostility with his coworkers. Parents of Reddit, why are you disappointed in your adult child? I just disowned my stepson last week. He came into my life at 12, a few months short of turning 13. He turned 23 a couple of months ago. It's been 10 years of hell. I missed my children, divorce sucks and I didn't see them enough, and really looked forward to him being my son. I knew from the moment he moved in that he was lying to me about virtually everything. No matter how big or small, he would deflect outright lies. He started getting bad grades in school, claiming I don't want to be a nerd. We worked with him. He'd get straight A's for 6 weeks, then purposefully start failing again. Then he got involved with the less desirable elements, older than him as well. He started fighting. A lot. Became his group's enforcer. At 15 he got locked up in a juvenile detention center with a boot camp-like program for 6 weeks. Model citizen. Perfect grades. Respectful. The instructors told us that they had no idea why he was even there. Came home 3 days before his 16th birthday. Perfect gentleman. On his birthday he went out with friends and disappeared for days. Came back, had obviously been using something, got in a fight with his mother, left. Came back, kicked in the back door and stole some electronics. We called the cops and they had him in 30 minutes, on his way to the pawn shop. In court the next day, he was rude and belligerent. Did 6 months in real juvie this time. Came home after Christmas. Back to school. Back to fighting. Finally got jumped by 3 guys with brass knuckles that put him in the hospital. Finally quit fighting. Dropped out of HS at 17. Got married a few months later. My wife is an idiot for supporting it. Gets her pregnant, they split up a few months in. Cue the cycle of him arguing with his mother, being hateful and nasty to her and leaving. Weeks or months go by, he comes back. Over the course of the last 6 years there have been girlfriends living with us because my wife cannot say no to her little boy. He won't hold a job. Best streak of working is about 2 months. Meanwhile he's been locked up multiple times for substances, being in a burglary ring, domestic violence, driving without a license, failure to pay child support. Did I mention that there are 2 kids by different mothers now? The latest is a return of one of the psycho girlfriends that I have explicitly banned from our property. That's crazy. Turns out a few weeks back they informed that she's pregnant. At the same time I warn her that the more she lets them hang out while I'm away, the better the chance that something bad happens. It did. He had one of his flare-ups one evening late. I'm out of town. He's stone cold sober. Gets pissed off at nothing. Really, I reviewed the security footage. Proceeds to get into an argument with his mother. Screaming in the front yard. It moves over by the garage. Grabbed her and threw her down on the driveway. Landed on the corner of the concrete on her tailbone. Couldn't get up. Spent most of the night in the hospital. I drove in from 2 hours away in the middle of the night. She's okay, but it could have been much worse. This is one more in a long string of events that culminated in physical violence for the first time. I didn't mince words. Never again. Disowned. She has agreed. Somehow I don't think it will last and that makes me sad. I have been clear though, from here out she can pick one of us. Him or me. What is the deepest, darkest secret you found out about a friend that really messed with your head? When I was around 8 years old I met a girl named Molly. Her family had moved in that summer to a house a few houses down and I really didn't see her for the first month or 2 that summer. My first memory of her was when I was playing with a small anthill in my backyard and she came over and joined me. She showed interest in my anthill and by 8-year-old logic she was the coolest person ever and we became best friends. We would play every day that we could in her backyard or my backyard, go to the pool, ride bikes, ride scooters, and play basketball. Basically if I went outside she would be out with me. A few years later we were still best friends and did everything together. When we were about 12-13ish I remember it was the late fall of 7th grade when she didn't show up for a month of school. When she came back she didn't really tell me why she was gone. She said that she was sick and was taking medication to get better, so I never thought too much about it after. We would still hang out every day but I started to notice that she wasn't the same. She wasn't as hyper as she always was, like she would have to take breaks more often when we were doing stuff. The summer before 8th grade and 8th grade she still seemed pretty normal, but I remember that her mom would call her in to take medication and she could stay out as long with me anymore. High school started. We went to the same high school but didn't get to hang out as much because I was playing baseball and she started to take up playing the piano. She used to play softball/baseball with me until she said she had to stop playing baseball, so she took up an instrument. Because of our different schedules we didn't get to see each other too often and we would once or twice a week, but it felt like we never talked. In the summer after freshman year we used to hang out every day but she couldn't go out as much. She would be inside her house more and I would go over to her place and watch TV, play video games, and she got really good with the piano so she would play when my family would go over for barbecues. This summer was also the same summer she was going to the doctors more often. She would always tell me it was just a checkup, and if she didn't say checkup she would say she was getting testing done. She would tell me that she was okay but I knew something wasn't okay. Our family shared a beach house down in South Carolina that we would go to in August of each summer. About the second week of being there that's when I found out. We would go out to the boardwalk pretty much every morning before it got too hot and just go to the beach, get ice cream cones every day and do whatever. This was the first summer that her dad had to come with us everywhere and it wasn't really a big deal, neither one of us really minded, but I didn't know why he wanted to come. We were standing in line to get food when I saw her pass out in the middle of ordering food for everyone. I was freaking out while her dad called her mom to meet them back at the house because Molly passed out. So he picked her up and we ran back to the house, which was about 5 minutes away, and just got in their car and started speeding towards the local hospital. Her parents took her to emergency care and I waited in the waiting room. I called my parents and told them what happened and they met me at the hospital. About 6 hours later I was allowed to see her and she told me that she was okay and that she must have passed out from the heat and not drinking enough water. She was staying at the hospital overnight, so she and my parents took me out to eat and stopped by the house first to get changed and stuff before heading back to the hospital. I had just finished showering and getting changed when her mom stopped by my room and told me that she and parents had to talk to me. This was the scariest moment of my life. Her parents had told me that Molly was diagnosed with ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, back in the 7th grade and that she wasn't expected to live much longer. Her condition was getting worse and she might only live for a few more years. I didn't know what ALS was, so they were explaining it me and I remember crying for an hours. I went back to the hospital with her parents to check up on her and get her food, and then we went to her room and they told her that they told me what was happening. She was literally a year or 2 from death, but she didn't cry or feel sorry for herself. She had just passed out and was smiling and joking about saying she wasn't going to have to do her summer projects and homework at least, and was comforting her parents and I. She was the most amazing person I have ever met to be able to be that happy and confident in the face of death. She ended up coming back to school that fall with me, and she told our small circle of friends what might happen to her in the coming year and how she wanted it to be the best year. It was the most bittersweet moment of my life. All my friends and I quit sports and after school clubs so we could hang out with her every day. And we all just did whatever she wanted. Any place she wanted to go, anything she wanted to do. My parents would even let me sleep over at her house whenever we wanted, and I basically ended up living with her for the entire sophomore year of high school. That was the most fun year of my life, and I won't forget it. That summer her condition worsened. And on August 17th she passed away. She was the prettiest, smartest, funniest, most confident, outgoing, energetic, friendliest and loving person I will ever know. How did you stupidly make your medical condition worse? It was Valentine's Day and I was sick. Fever, chills, fatigue, nausea, and general misery had kept me home for the day. I'm in the medical field myself, and it seemed that the entire region was currently decimated by this year's influenza strain, so no biggie. That weird twinge in my side that started a few days ago was probably a pulled muscle from too many back stretches at the dance studio, right? I had shrugged it off, but now it legitimately hurt with every step I took. Ugh, fine, I'll go to the stupid clinic today, but later. First I need some more sleep. I woke up with barely enough time to fling myself out of bed and towards the hall bath, getting there just in time to vomit more fluids than I thought I'd consumed. Also, I noticed the lack of the coughing or congestion that typically arrives with the flu, so maybe there's something else going on. That pain is right over my left kidney, but it's probably nothing. Okay, then, I should probably get my pukey butt to the nearest urgent care clinic, and I definitely shouldn't be driving. I called husband and explained the current circumstances, asking him to come home and take me to the doctors. Because I'm a stubborn paramedic who hates it when people go directly to the hospital's emergency room for ridiculously minor things, I went to an urgent care clinic near my house. I expected to have a PA confirm my self-diagnosis and tell me to tough it out with Flonase and Mucinex, because treating a virus like influenza usually means managing the symptoms and trying to decrease the discomfort. The PA took a quick look at me and told me to go to the ER. As is my wont, I protested, but she was serious enough that I was actually considering going. I finally agreed to go just to make husband more comfortable with the situation, but I fully expected that this was a waste of time and hours of my life I'd never get back. By the time we arrive, I've accepted that I have pyelonephritis, a kidney infection, but still feel the ER is overkill. After triage and a preemptive blood draw for labs, I was taken to a room. I didn't even have time to change into the stupid, drafty, butt-bearing gown provided before my nurse arrived to start a saline drip to treat my dehydration. Cool, pretty standard stuff so far. Several minutes later I was talking with the physician about my signs and symptoms when there's a perfunctory knock at the door and a lab tech entered to hand deliver my test results. Uh-oh. This can't be good. I watch her eyes widen as she reads the CBC values, and then she announces, "Yeah, we're gonna be keeping you overnight." She then orders a second 4-line, hardcore painkillers, and a massive dose of 4 antibiotics and leaves me trying to figure out what just happened through a pain and narcotic haze. Well, okay, it is around 8 in the evening at this point, so overnight observation seems reasonable. I expect a patient transport tech to come fetch me and take me upstairs to a general medical ward. Instead, an RN starts to wheel my bed towards the elevator, which is really weird. Nurses usually have better things to do than move patients between wards. At this point, I hadn't been told anything about what was wrong or where I was going, but I start to get somewhat nervous as I'm moved into an intensive care unit. I rationalize this by telling myself that they must be out of general med/surge beds, and so I'm being put into this room as overflow. It's a huge room, and my nurse appears to have only one patient, me. Man, this crap keeps getting weirder. Within minutes, I'm hooked up to every type of monitor I've ever attached to a patient and then some, plus I've got a transmitting cardiac telemetry monitor stuck to me, too. My nurse goes through the endless list of health history, lifestyle, and medication questions, and asks husband to bring my birth control pills from home. What the F? I have pyelonephritis, and this is ridiculous. Is that really necessary? I mean, I'll be home tomorrow. She looks at me with both amusement and pity, and then continues bustling about the room doing important nursing tasks. Yeah, I was wrong. It wasn't the flu. She shattered my last layer of denial by showing me my lab results, and holy effing crap, my white count is 28.77. I'm effing dying. A normal white blood cell value is between 3 and 10, and I was so far past that I was in critical condition. Turns out I was in septic shock in addition to renal failure and E. coli septicemia, and had I waited a few more hours to seek medical help I'd have probably been toast. EFF. I couldn't deny the seriousness of the situation anymore, but I just felt too crappy to even care. After a sleepless night and an endless parade of nurses, CNAs, phlebotomists, X-ray/imaging techs, and a priest, I finally met my attending physician and a whole crew of residents. I'm exhausted, grumpy, and in pain, but apparently I still need to be lectured on how dangerously close to death I'd gotten by waiting to seek help, despite the fact that I had practically zero reason to suspect so. Anyway, afterwards we have a nice, roundtable discussion of my treatment plan, how the antibiotics are working, and about how I'm probably going to be just fine in a couple days. Ha, wrong again. Turns out the massive infusion of fluids and treatments to kickstart my kidneys caused my lungs to fill with fluid, resulting in a condition called ARDS in which, well, you can't freaking breathe. The alveoli, those little sacs in your lungs that do the CO2/oxygen exchanging, were effectively flooded, meaning that no matter how much air you're gulping in, you simply can't extract the amount of oxygen needed to live without medical intervention. I really didn't want to end up intubated with a ventilator breathing for me, and my awesome attending let me try the less dramatic option of diuretics and staying awake to remember to breathe. It sucked. Seriously, the worst, most miserable experience I've been through. But it worked, and on the morning of day 5 in the hospital I got transferred to a general medical ward. It was blessedly quiet, at least until I dozed off and my oxygen sots would drop again and then the monitor would shriek me awake. I was slowly weaned off of supplemental oxygen over the next few days, and eventually got to go home on the condition that I'd sleep with a little extra oxygen at night. The scariest thing about the whole experience was how it snuck up on me so stealthily. Our working theory is that I must have had a completely asymptomatic UTI that progressed to my kidneys, but we'll probably never know for sure. I mean, UTIs aren't generally subtle, and if I'd even suspected I had one I'd have gone to urgent care for a UA and an antibiotic script. I knew what to look for and it still nearly managed to end me. I'm fine now, feeling much better. I'm definitely still tired and lack stamina, but I'd say I'm at about 85%, and it shouldn't be too long until I'm as completely healthy as I'm likely to get. I may have lost some kidney function, so I'll continue to go in for routine blood tests, but we're very optimistic about how the most recent scans looked. I took LSD and pretended to be French for 10 months. About 11 months ago I moved into a new house as a temporary sort of thing until I could get the money together to sort something out properly. I was hoping to have already moved out by this point. On my second day after I'd finished unpacking I decided to break the house in with a nice acid trip. I'd brought some with me that I'd recently bought but hadn't had the chance to use yet. Things were going well with the trip, but then it seemed to be getting really intense and I quickly realized that the tabs were much stronger than I had been told they were, and I thought being locked up in the unfamiliar house wasn't helping me relax. So I figured the best thing to do to relax would be to go for a stroll because I was starting to get pretty overwhelmed at that point. So I left the house to start my walk and my next door neighbor happened to be just arriving at the same time. It's a street of tightly packed terraced houses, so next door's door is about 1 meter away from mine. I'd not met anybody on my street yet and didn't realize this was a friendly tight-knit community where people talk to each other. She said something along the lines of hello, nice to meet you, my name's, her name, are you new to the area? So basically I do this thing sometimes when people try to sell me things on the street etc. where I pretend I can't speak English. I remember a few words from my GCSE French, so I just say some nonsense sentences and then people usually leave me alone. In the state I was in, this conversation seemed like it would be way too intense for me and French just sort of came to me as my default response to the situation. My exact words were "Je voudrais une boulangerie," one of my favorite lines to use, and I shrugged my shoulders a bit with a weak smile. She pretty much just left me to it after that and I got on my way. I did my walk and got home about 2 hours later. I was tripping majorly, so the walk ended up taking a lot longer than it needed to. When I got home though, my next door neighbor was standing in her doorway talking to another neighbor who was standing outside. I tried to keep my head down because I couldn't handle any more human interaction, but she waved at me and said bonjour, so I instinctively returned the bonjour and got inside my house as fast as possible. When I got in I started freaking out straight away because I realized that I'd just become French and now 2 of the neighbors think I can't speak any English. The next day when I woke up I realized the best thing I could do, as an Englishman, was just live with the lie for the rest of my short stay in this house to avoid the excruciating embarrassment of having pretended to be French for seemingly no reason. Fast forward 10 months, I still live here, and at this point I'm in deep. My life on this street is a web of lies. I've perfected my French accent and over the course of 10 months French me has learned a decent amount of English so he can hold a disjointed conversation. I'd gotten to know the neighbors pretty well and I was the nice quirky French guy on the street. I didn't let the lie slip ever, because every day in every conversation I had just meant that it would be even worse if anyone ever discovered I wasn't French. If I had friends come over, I don't have many so it wasn't too bad, they would never speak to the neighbors because of my strange situation. Most of them found it amusing, at least. Things were going okay and I wasn't too worried about being exposed anymore because I'd gotten so used to it. I'm not home that much and when I am I rarely leave the house for any reason, so I only had to do it for maybe 5 minutes a day when I was out on my street. If anything, it was a nice way to spice up my day when I got to take on my French persona. French me somehow had much better social skills than the real me, even if his English was a bit limited. But then there was the day it all came crashing down. I was walking to my car and saw one of the neighbors coming towards me from the opposite direction with someone else next to her I didn't recognize. She stopped to say hi, as she normally does, and then she said to her friend, "This is F7TJ78, the guy I was telling you about. You might be able to see where this is going." Her friend hit me with a question in French that I didn't understand a word of, and I knew he was actually French straight away because his accent was way better than mine. I didn't know what to do and I just froze. Every second that went past just made it so much more painful, and after way too long of a pause I just decided I had to come clean. I told her I wasn't actually French and couldn't speak French, and then I tried to play it off like some kind of practical joke I'd been doing on everyone. Nobody was buying that. I fast walked straight to my car and then let the embarrassment just swallow me for a while. I haven't spoken to any of my neighbors since, some of which I'd struck up a friendly relationship with over those 10 months. I make sure nobody is around now whenever I leave the house, and I do a loop around the block in my car if any of my neighbors are walking down the street when I get home so that I never come into contact with them. Every time I think about the day I was discovered, the embarrassment physically hurts me. Women who gave the creep a chance. How did it go? There was a guy that came into my work restaurant a few times a week for lunch. He did this for a little over a month, so he became a regular. He had asked me out every time I brought his bill. He always asked in a lighthearted way and never seemed upset or anything when I turned him down. I assumed that after the first few questions, he may have thought of it as more of an inside joke at that point. Like he was just asking now to make light of the previous rejections and to make it less awkward or something. He always gave me weird vibes but seemed nice enough, so I thought I might have just been making assumptions because of his appearance and wasn't being fair. One time that he asked, I decided randomly to agree and give him a shot. Why not, I thought. He was always super kind and I had gotten rather used to the awkwardness I felt being around him. He seemed so excited and I asked him to leave his number on the receipt and I would call/text him when I wasn't busy to set something up. So it wasn't really much of a joke to keep asking me out. I mostly figured that though TBH. A few days later I hadn't texted him yet to set anything up or even give him my number, and I get a text only a few minutes after walking into my house after I got home from work. It said, "Hey. It's from. I know it's a long shot, but I'm free tonight and bored. Wanna hang out? If you're free, that is." I asked him how he got my number. He said I gave it to him the night I agreed. I absolutely know I didn't. I got really creeped out but decided not to confront him about it and just play like I'm a ditz and believe that I must have done that. I just didn't remember because it was busy. I told him that I wasn't free to hang out that night, that I was going to be working later to help cover a shift and then would be pretty pooped by the time I was off. I only ever saw him come in for lunch, not ever dinner shifts. A few minutes passed before he responded. He said, "Why are you lying to me?" I just responded with, "What? Lol." He said, "I know you were home. If you didn't want to hang out tonight you could have just said so." Alarm bells rang in my head. I thought, there's no way he's outside my house. He is just trying to call my bluff. Creepy but not a full-blown stalker. But I felt exposed. I felt the crawling on my skin that only burns into you when someone is staring at you. The vulnerable pulses that are felt only by prey. I looked out through the blinds of my bedroom and he was parked right outside my house. I could see his face lit up by the phone screen. He was so close. I texted him and said, "Ahaha, you caught me. How did you know I was bluffing? I'm sorry. I do want to hang out soon. I'm just not feeling up to it tonight." And called 911. The police showed up and went up to his car and talked to him for a bit. He drove away a few minutes later and then the officers came to my door. They told me that they acted like a random neighbor complaining about a strange car. They didn't implicate anyone but made it seem like it was an older person, so probably not me. They took his plate information but asked him politely to move so he didn't upset anyone in the neighborhood, and he complied. I went to my friend's house that night and filed a restraining order the next morning. I later found out that he most likely got my number from the shift sheet behind the hostess counter, because several coworkers had seen him, at different times, snooping back there and kindly stopped him. He, I guess, grabbed a roll of silverware claiming that the server hadn't left him any and he didn't want to bother anyone because he knew they were busy, so just grabbed it himself. This stopped anyone from suspecting him of anything odd. And that his car had been parked at my house almost every night, neighbor's security camera. I don't know how he got my address, but I assume he must have followed me. He must have been full on stalking me for a while. He did come into my work a day or two later for lunch acting like everything was normal. I immediately went and got my manager and she informed him that he had a restraining order against him preventing him from eating there because he would be in violation of it. I had already changed my phone number, so I don't know if he tried to text me, and I didn't sleep at my house for weeks, but I never saw him again after that. And I often find myself thinking back to that time and wondering how much more he did and for how long that I don't know about. Like, maybe he stalked me long before he started coming into the restaurant, and only started coming in there because he felt more brave than before to interact with me. How much of my private moments throughout my life were actually not private? Also, I have never once stopped feeling scared that he might have still stalked me and knows where I am even now, but is keeping himself hidden. I doubt it, but the fear is still there. I have never felt comfortable being alone. Ever. Most of this would have still probably happened even if I didn't agree to give him a chance. But if he hadn't slipped up about having my phone number when he shouldn't, I would have gone out somewhere with him, and who knows how badly that could have ended. What is the worst first date you have ever been on? More like a first date that never wanted to end, so this might be long. I had just moved to a different state and decided to try out the online dating scene. This was before the days of Tinder, and Match.com was one of the only options. I matched with a guy that seemed to be pretty genuine, decent looking, and wasn't horrible in phone/text conversation. We decided to meet at a restaurant to grab appetizers and drinks. When we got there, the conversation seemed great. He even looked like his picture. Shortly after getting there, we both decided to order dinner because we were both hungry and had a rough day at work. He offered to pay. Shortly after ordering, he grabs my hand as it was resting on the table next to my drink. He proceeds to hold it and seems to have no desire to let it go. Sadly, he still seemed very genuine. He then switches our conversation from work and friends to how he has baby fever. We're both in our young 20s, mind you. He's still holding my hand. No amount of tugging will give him the message, and at this point I'm beyond creeped out to the point of scared. I don't believe I said a word to him after he uttered the words baby fever. Food comes. Thank heavens. I can finally get my hand back. Nope. Think again. He wants to hold hands and eat at the same time. Of course, me being a young 20-something, I ordered a salad, which is totally doable with only one hand. Rookie mistake. The waiter comes over and can obviously see my desperation. I'm fairly certain I'm sweating at this point, my hand feels gross, and I'm awkwardly looking around for an exit strategy. I can't even grab my drink without making a bigger effort, then the glorious moment happens. The waiter accidentally spills my wine on my date. My hand is finally free. My date rushes off to the bathroom to clean up. He seems overly understanding after having an entire glass of red wine dumped on him. The waiter apologizes, then looks me dead in the eye and says, "I got you, go now. I'll take care of it." I immediately got up, said, "Thank you," and got out so fast I almost forgot my coat. Waiter chased me down to give it to me. At this point, I have no clue what happened after I left, and I didn't care. I get a text later from my date that says how he hopes everything is okay. Ignore and block. A day or so later, I get a message from a coworker that someone is waiting in the hallway for me. Where I work, you can't get into the building without being an employee. I think nothing of it and walk out to see who it is. It's common to wait there as our office is only open for the IT nerds. I open the door, turn to see who's there, and yelp. Excited to see me? And I'm effed. I must have had the biggest look of disgust and terror mixed with gas on my face. Mr. Creepy Handholder Online Dating Sucks First Date works at my company. He asks how my grandma is doing. I play along assuming that the waiter said something about her. He reaches out to grab my hand and I yell out I'm infertile. I had no clue where that came from, nor did I have any idea if I was. He looked at me strangely without saying a word, and I used the awkward distraction to go back into my office. I got a message from him later that day on my work chat asking if I'd be interested in fertility treatments. I noped right out of that conversation and went directly to security. I never heard or saw him again.